Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, there you go.
Does this work? Yes. I'm John Sellers from Thrillist, and I'm here with the awesome David Harbour.
Thank you. Thanks. I hope you guys have seen the show. You haven't just seen this episode because I don't come off very well until about 4 or 5. I start to really kick into gear.
Yeah,
I get so many tweets that people are like, Chief Hopper sucks, man, like on episode 1, and then by like 4 or 5, you're like, oh, I love this guy. So you know.
Yeah, it's a great introduction to a character. See the backside, chilling out on the couch.
Yeah. Smoking a cigarette while brushing his teeth. Oral hygiene for all you kids out there.
Exactly. I'm actually really curious about this. Like, throughout that episode, you definitely appear that you know that you have a hangover as a character. Yeah. And so was that a conscious, like?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it was one of the first things that scene when I walk into the office and I have the coffee and contemplation line and all that stuff and the donut and she's nagging me and, you know, there was a lot of, some of the sensory work that I'm from, like, you guys are all actors, right? Yeah, I love it. I love talking to actors. So, like, I'm from, my school of training is American Method. And so a lot of the sensory work that I did was based on, one of the big sensory tools I use in the first section of the show is headache. And so, like, in that whole scene, like, you don't see it, but it's what it does to my eyes and the whole thing. It's like, I was definitely working on headache, yeah.
Yes. Did you didn't go to method though, like, and actually get wasted the night before?
No, you know what? Okay, hold on. We got to talk about method here. Because I think there is such a misperception in this country about the American method. And this whole idea of, like, the American method is just really trying to align yourself to the character. And so this idea that you act out your role in life is not the American method. And in fact, Strasberg and these guys were very interested in rhythm and very interested in the differences in genres and things like that. A lot of things that I think has been perverted now into, like, mailing people dead pigs or what. All that stuff is like nonsense to me. Like, the American method is really about getting personal with, what you have to bring as a human being and then what the character is and really trying to align those things. But it's not a one-for-one. In other words, like, the headache thing is a one-for-one. Like, he probably is experiencing a headache, and he does. But a lot of times when you're using something sensorially, it may not be a one-for-one. Like, when my kid dies, it's not like I've had a dead kid or I have to experience the death of a child, but I have feelings of guilt and feelings of loss that come from other places that may line up in that way. But that's when, you start to use sensory work as a metaphor more than the actual one-for-one of it.
Spoiler alert.
Oh, yeah. If you haven't seen the episode, yeah. Right. Well, you kind of know from the beginning, though, right? You see that picture on the wall of, like, a happy family, and then you see this dude on the couch drunk, and there's clearly no family. It's just a double wide and a bunch of Schlitz cans. So you know that, like, he's probably something's happened.
Yeah, it's a fascinating character because, like, he, as he progresses through it, he gets more and more, like, invested in it again. It's almost like he reawakes. I don't know. You're right, because, like, at first you're like, that guy's such an asshole.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, absolutely. It's a really gratifying arc to play, because I do believe that acting at its best, when you touch people, you can maybe move them to a greater empathy for other people in their lives. And the idea that you start out sort of not liking this guy and thinking he's kind of a jerk and thinking he's, like, really lost, and then you start to see where all that loss comes from, and you start to unravel this onion. Maybe we in our own lives we can take into that people that are jerks, maybe they're coming from someplace. And I think that inclusiveness is something that I think is really something that we're able to do as actors. I think it's something very special that can resonate. If that makes any sense.
It makes tons of sense. So W.C. Fields said, never work with children or animals.
Yeah, I know. And I did both.
Yeah. How do you agree with that?
I agree with him wholeheartedly. No, the kids are great. That dog was a nightmare, though. That dog, oh my God, that was the worst day on set. That thing
What do you
would
mean?
not bark at the shed. And like, he was terrified of Winona, so Winona has to come over and pick him and grab him and take him off, and they did not get along at all. So it just took forever, and it's the only time. I'm never like a diva, like I love to work and everything, but it was the one day on set where I was like, I'll be in my trailer. Like I stormed out. I was like, I can't work with this co-star. But you know, the kids are great. I mean, they're such great little actors, and they're really just they're real kids, you know, like they're real dorky and weird, and so and they like love to tell stupid jokes to each other and stuff, and you're just like, oh man, I remember what it was like to be 12. But you know, luckily, sort of Hopper has a very authoritative relationship with them. So, you know, and this I did get a little method on this in terms of like I didn't want to be around the kids too much. I didn't want to engage in all the love that people experience with them. I wanted to stay very distant from them because he has a problem with children. I mean, he's terrified and sort of hates kids as a result of what he's been through. And so I wanted to preserve that reality and that energy. So I kind of stayed away from them, to be honest. But they're wonderful people, and they're wonderful in the show. So.
I could ask you like a lot of questions that are just about this, but I feel like I should ask you some other stuff that isn't just about Stranger Things, and we'll come back to it.
Sure.
Because,
yeah, love it.
You know,
I have done other things.
you've done a lot of other things.
I am 41 after all.
What?
I know. I
thought
know.
you were 25. So in another dimension, sorry, you have an EGOT. This is my dimension, but instead you have a Tony nomination for.
I do, yeah.
Who's Virginia Woolf? Who's
I
Afraid of
lost.
Virginia
Yeah,
Woolf?
I'm
You
a big
did,
loser.
But in the other dimension, you have an EGOT.
An EGOT? What's that?
Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony.
I got the T.
You do.
I got the T.
You do.
All right.
Um,
I'll never win a Grammy. You should hear me sing.
Okay. Well, maybe you'll win for singing horribly.
I
An
hope
album.
they have that category, yeah.
Okay. I was going to ask, so when you are doing a play or a movie that has like a finite ending, you know what the character's going to be doing all the way through, how is that different from acting on a show?
Oh, it's so much better to know the arc of the character. I mean, I don't understand. Like, and I have to say, for Stranger Things, I knew it. Like, we had 6 episodes written when we did the first table read, and then the last 2, I knew exactly where the arc was going to go, and they wrote them while we were shooting, but I knew exactly where he was going to end up. And I have to say that, like, I think there's a lot of disrespect for actors that goes on in the film and TV business now. Like, you know, you'll get an audition, you'll get sides for an audition, or you'll even get like mock sides, and they just want you to like come in and like be strong and look at the camera and like be like manly or something. I mean, it's like so ridiculous, and they don't understand that we actually, when we study and when we train, we are good at revealing human behavior and human psychology, and like. And if you give us something to play, like we can actually add layers and colors and nuance and all these things. And so, you know, I even recently had an audition where they were like, "Oh, you have to meet this guy. He's brilliant, but there's no script, and like you just have to go in." I was like, "This is me. This is jive. I mean, like why?" Like a writer writes a script, right? And they sit around, they go get coffee, they come back, they write. They have a process, and like we as actors have processes as well, but there's such a weird thing in acting now where I feel like it's kind of looked down upon, I think, as a result of a lot of trends in movies and television where they think that you can just show up and say lines and just sort of look pretty and that it'll translate. And I miss those days where, you know, we really were psychological artists and you could reveal the life of a human being through behavior, through very specific behavior, through And you only can do that when you have an arc of a character. I mean, I've done TV, I've done other really terrible shows. I've done some okay shows too, but I've done some really terrible shows where you show up week to week and you're like, and they write you a scene and then you're like, oh, suddenly this guy's really into incense or something. And you're like, I was like crafting this whole guy. It was like about this. And now suddenly like we threw all that out and he's just about this. And you're like, okay, like this is nonsense, whatever. Just give me the check.
Yeah. I mean, that would be hard because like you make one decision in like, let's say episode 3, and then it completely is, refuted by like something that the writers decide like 10 episodes later if you haven't seen it going in.
Yeah.
I mean, that must be hard.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I have to know about Hopper and his daughter to be able to play those first scenes with Winona and to be as harsh as I am with her, because you know that the reason why he hates you'll figure out the reason why he hates kids, but it's only because of his own guilt and his own shame and his own inability to save his own child, that the last thing in the world he wants to do is like go look for a missing kid. And also the detail of his relationship with Winona's character Joyce, like there's a lot of backstory in that some of which came out in this season, but we'll see more of. And I have to know that so I can know like my relationship with her in the beginning and how it grows. But if I didn't know the growth of it, I wouldn't know what to play in the beginning. I wouldn't know what to highlight. I wouldn't know, like a director is, mapping you through. He's telling you what to watch. And me as an actor, I'm telling you what to watch too. And I think that you need the whole story to be able to say, like, this is going to be important later, the fact that he's so mean to these kids, because you'll see where that comes from later. And that's so gratifying to be able to do that.
Tell me everything about season 2. Right. I need to know everything right now.
I know that you say that, but I know that you, in your heart, you don't want to know.
No.
Because it's so good. And I almost wish that I didn't know. Because it's so, it's just so fun to experience for the first time, and like you'll get such a kick out of where we go in season 2. I've read some scripts, and the first 5 minutes are like out of control, and I know you got a long time to wait next summer, but if we do our job on the production end, I think it'll be really special, and you'll really just like love it if you don't know anything. So there you go.
So can we go back to the beginning? Like how did you get started in this? And what was like an early role that convinced you that, I actually really want to do this?
I mean, I was acting since I was like 5 years old. I did The Wizard of Oz. I was the Tin Man in kindergarten, and my mother thought I was amazing. I was very bossy too. I was like walking around the stage telling everyone else what to do. But ever since then, I really, like loved it. And I really was kind of a ham, like I liked being the center of attention. And then in high school, I started to feel like people experience the world differently than me. Like people claimed to be happy, and I thought they were really angry. And people claimed to be being nice to each other, and I actually experienced them being mean. And so it sort of put me into a world of like thinking that I was crazy, and then also started delving into the fact that people lie, and they like have psychology, and they have subconscious, and they say things they don't mean, and blah, blah, and I would try to say these things to people, and they would get mad at me, but then I would go on stage and kind of do them, and people would applaud. And so acting became this very healthy way of expressing this confusion that I felt about human beings and about being alive in the world. And then I never thought I could do it. I grew up in Westchester, very sort of upper middle class family. Nobody thought I could do it. They thought I would use my acting skills in the courtroom as a lawyer. Everybody wanted me to be a lawyer or whatever. And I went to Dartmouth. I sort of did the thing that you do. I wanted to drop out and come to New York and be an actor, but I wasn't brave enough. I went to Dartmouth. I had a tough time, came to New York. I had a really tough time here in New York because a lot of kids come right out of Juilliard and NYU, and I couldn't get seen by anybody. I would go, and one of the things I will say, if you're struggling as an actor, like I was tenacious as hell. Like I would do things that would upset people. Like I remember going into the Public Theater in New York, which is like my favorite. It has been my favorite theater since I was a kid. I saw Shakespeare in the Park when I was like 12, and I fell in love with it. And I would go in with my headshot and resume like every day for like a month. And they were like, "You have to stop coming in here." And I was like, "I can't because I don't have a job and I need to work for you." So like I was very bullish about wanting to do what I did. And then I started to, and then one of the big things in my life was that I was not taking care of myself. I was very angry, and I was very, and so I was drinking a lot, and I got sober, and that really helped me clarify my intention, what I wanted to do. And so I got sober, and then I started to be able to work, and I worked in soap operas. I did As the World Turns for 3 years, which was amazing because they paid you $1,000 a day.
Wow.
And you'd like work, like I'd work like 4 days a month, and I was like a rich man. I was like a king.
Right.
And
How did you get that?
the soap operas?
Yeah, like what
Well, I randomly got an agent through an ex-girlfriend of mine who lived in LA, and she hooked me up with her agency. I went in, this is back in the day too, where I went in and did a monologue like in an agency. I don't know if this happens anymore at all, but like now they just want to see your tape or they want to like send you out or something. But like I went in and like full on did a monologue for the casting director, and they were like, "Okay, we'll send you out." And they sent me on an audition for As the World Turns, and I got a part of Officer Shanks. And he was locking up women in the town because they were being unruly. But he was kind of bumbling, and he would like forget the keys and like do things that were like not good. So I got that part, and I worked 3 days, and then they kept writing for me. Like they would write, and they'd put me in like 5 or 6 episodes a month, and then I went off and started doing plays in New York, and I was able to. One of my breaks was understudying. I understudied in The Rainmaker years ago. I understudied in a play called Time of the Cuckoo. Mm-hmm. And then I guess my first big like Broadway break was I did The Invention of Love by Tom Stoppard. It was at the Lyceum, and I played this like young, like it was a great role, like this, kind of Adonis. I was in much better shape back then. But this guy who was like the love interest of Robert Sean Leonard's character. And I remember this was a really amazing thing, was like I had this Broadway, like I wasn't the star, but I had like a Broadway big role. And Ben Brantley came and he gave the play a rave. And he said the only thing that was lacking was David Harbour. And he's not very good, basically. Wow. I stayed up like till 5 a.m. trying to get, for the review. I read it and I was heartbroken. But it really fired in me this thing, which I think is really important as actors, which is like, instead of going like, yeah, you know what, you're right, I was like, well, you better get used to me because I'm going to be here. So, yeah, right? And then a year later, I did a play in the park, and he said the play was terrible and I was really good. And and he mentioned the review of Invention of Love in his review. And so it was kind of like, and I actually was better in that play anyway. I mean, he was kind of right. But it was a real great time because I remember thinking, we have to weather all this rejection, all this stuff. We have to continue to study, and we have to continue to keep at it. And so it really fired me up.
That's awesome. Okay, I'm going to do a yes. Applaud that. That was amazing. I have 2 questions from the audience. Well, there's more than that, but I'm going to do 2 because they're the exact same question. Oh wait, but this is from the finale. Does that matter? Is that bad?
No, we can talk about the finale, right? A lot of you have seen it, right?
This is from
Okay, yeah.
Tristan and Tony with an I. Okay. They both want to know.
What do you want to know?
What did those men at the end of the last episode say to you in the car?
They said, look, basically what's happening is the lab. I had to make a deal with Brenner in the final episode to get to go into the rift. Part of that deal was to give up 11 in a certain way, although to Hopper's credit, he probably knows that she can take care of herself. But I had to kind of give her up. And then also, there's this scene in the hallway where Winona and I are walking down the hallway, and I say to her, if you want to do this, none of this ever happened. Like, we have to pretend like none of this has ever happened. And so that scene in the car and whatever Hopper gets himself into at the end of the season relates to the fact that this has all got to be covered up. This has all got to be kept under wraps. And so going into this season, we'll start to deal with some of that, some of what he has to do to make sure that nobody knows that this ever occurred.
So he didn't say, Lego my ego?
No, because clearly he doesn't let go his ego. He puts those egos. Actually, yeah, he puts those egos in the box, doesn't he?
This one's from Carson Coughlin. Was there room for improvisation in such a tightly crafted story?
Yes.
If so, how much?
Coffee and Contemplation was a little improv'd.
Nice.
What else was improv'd? Little moments were improv'd, but I almost feel like even when the script is tight and there's a lot of room for types of improvisation, like behavioral improvisation. There's moments, I don't know if it's in the first episode, where Jonathan comes out and says, like, I want to help you with my mom, or so I want to come with you. And I say, like, you need to stay here with your mom. And I like punch him in the shoulder, kind of. And so there was a lot of room in the script. Like, Hopper was not written, you know, the way that he's played. And so there's a lot of room for behavior. There's a lot of improv in that way. And a lot of stuff just happened on the day, in the moment. The script, and we would mess around with the lines too. The Duffers are very amenable to, and they're great to collaborate. If you ever get a chance to work with these guys, like, they were very respectful of my process and very respectful of what I wanted to do, and didn't really give me notes. They just sort of like let me go and do what I wanted to do. And so in that way, they let me bring a lot to the character that other directors, I think, would have been like, no, just do this, just do that. And they were like, you know, there's a lot of scenes where I'm sprawling and doing all kinds of different things, and they just sort of let me go.
So we have 5 more minutes, so I'm going to move this along real quick. How did you get your SAG card?
How did I get my SAG card? How did I get my SAG card? Well, I think soap operas were AFTRA. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
And so I got my SAG card, I think, through Law and Order. I was Mike the waiter. And I had 4 lines. And it was Jerry Orbach and Jesse Martin. Yeah, the legendary Jerry Orbach, who, by the way, was like so good to me because I was a guest star and it was my coverage and they wanted to break for lunch so bad and we could only do 1 take and I was so nervous, and Jerry Orbach just reached out before the take and was like, you got this, man. And I was like, ah. And so, yeah, Law and Order. Law and Order.
That's a great way to get it.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice from early in your career or mid-career that, you know, really helped you focus or understand what the career was about, or that, you know, that really inspired you?
I think the most important thing that I recently went back to studying again before this part, and I think it made a big difference because I hadn't been in acting class for a while, and I got cynical, and I got cynical about Hollywood and about where I was in Hollywood, being a supporting character, and them just wanting me to show up with a gun and, like, you know, run down hallways and stuff. And I went back and I started studying again with a teacher, this guy Tony Greco, who's an American method teacher, and it really changed me, and it really changed my work, and it really gave me a lot more faith in what we do as actors, which I had been lacking for a while. So, I mean, my advice, or the biggest thing that's happened to me recently, has been that we can continue, like that I can continue to hone my craft and hone what I do and develop and deepen the waters that I start to swim in now. And I can go to places that I've never been before. And that you can continue to do that at 40 is like a real revelation to me. And yeah, that's my advice, is to continue to study.
That's great advice for me.
Thank
you. I'm not an actor. I mean, seriously, that's just like life advice. Just keep at it, you know, and like really like try to understand everything there is to know about what you do, right? Did you really hurt your Achilles heel?
Yeah.
Plain Achilles?
Yeah.
That really happened?
Yeah, I tore my Achilles tendon. I was playing Achilles in Troilus and Cressida in Central Park this summer, and I was jumping around. I tore my Achilles. So in that way, I'm a very method actor.
Right. When do you start? When do you go back to film?
We go back next week, end of next week. We go down to Atlanta for another 6 months and shoot 9 episodes. And I'm very excited and a little bit nervous. But I'm very excited to get back into this character because I love this guy so much. I mean,
what are you doing to get back into the character?
I started smoking again. It's true. Like, I quit, and then he's a smoker. Like, he just is. And it changes my face. It changes the way I look. Changes my ability to do sensory work with that. So I have to work with that. So I started smoking. I also, and then I'm starting to get personal. Like, I'm starting to do a lot of work around his soul, you know, where he's at a year later, because we pick up a year later, having had this experience where he did save a kid, so he's not quite as miserable as he was. He did have this sort of affirming experience, and he has a rich sort of arc in this one surrounding, I don't want to say too much, but he has a lot of different pots on the stove that he has to deal with. So I'm starting to explore all those different relationships. And for me, a lot of that is just like sitting around, doing basic relaxation and sort of going into the well of like personal objects and overall sensations and stuff, and thinking about the tools that I can start to use, and then really starting to uncover the deep psychology of this guy and why he does what he does. So hopefully on the day, I can come up with behavior that is spontaneous and revelatory of character.
What do you do right before you get back into role? Like, are you preparing in your trailer, or are you just like chilling? Like, what do you?
I tend to, on set, I tend to do basic relaxation, and I tend to work on sensory stuff, and then I tend to get really involved with the other actor that I'm working with. And I tend to get very personal. So in that way, you know, I do think that there is this line of character and actor that starts to blend, right? And so, like, when you see me annoyed with Winona, on its best days, that's Hopper annoyed with Joyce, of course, but it also is me annoyed with Winona. And also when you see me in love with her, sort of, or like that is me like loving this human being. And I think, you know, it's a dangerous sort of soup to start to play with, but I do think it creates rich work, and you can feel it when people are being personal, because you have your sensory work that's all about you, and then you have another human being, and that human being affects you. And like Winona affects me. I mean, we have a very personal relationship, and we don't take it outside. Like we're friendly, but we don't like have to, but in the moment on the day, I have to look at her as a human being, and I have to feel and be affected by everything that she does and try to be present with her. And I think that creates, once you do this sensory work and blend those two things, I think it creates a really rich scene. So I try to stay pretty focused on allowing myself the freedom to, you know, because in social convention and being charming on set, you don't allow yourself to be like, you know what, I really think you're a fucking jerk right now. What, like, you don't allow yourself to really go there with like what you really think of a human being, but you have to be able to do that when the cameras roll. You have to be able to reveal that in your face or in your behavior or whatever. And so I try to stay present with trying not to be as charming or whatever, and trying to stay with my work.
Is Hopper the monster?
He is a monster in episode 1, isn't he?
Yes.
He's kind of a monster.
Yes. Trying to think of other theories. What's the craziest theory you've been asked on Twitter?
The craziest theory. Yeah, people have lots of different theories. I mean, I had a crazy theory. So, but it didn't. They told me I was wrong about it. But like,
Oh, then you were right.
but like, I thought that like
Misdirection.
she and the monster were like the same thing. Like, because she even says like, "I am the monster," and blah, blah, blah. But like, and I was like, "Oh, it's a reflection of her. It's like her darker self," and like, blah, blah, blah. And the Duffers were like, "No, it's just a monster." So I guess that's the craziest theory. Is my own.
Good. Good. All right. Well, this is fun. I could probably ask 1,000 more questions about Stranger Things season 2. We'll do that next time.
Next time.
come back
All right.
next year?
Sure. Yeah,
All
I'd
right.
love to. I love this. I love talking to actors. It's like my favorite thing to do.
All right, man. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.